Alright. Guys. We're joined now by Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist and host of System Update. Exclusively on Rumble. The one and only Glenn Greenwald. Great to see you. Sir. Good to see you. Crystal. So. I wanted to start by talking about the MAGA influencers who are in disarray over the Trump administration's decision to close the case on Jeffrey Epstein. They've declared that he definitively killed himself. That we shouldn't worry about it. And that there was never a client list. This had been a real article of faith for so many. I'm not sure I even realized how central it was to a lot of MAGA expectations about what would unfold in a second Trump administration. But before I jump in, I'm going to show you a clip of Alex Jones in just a second. First, I just wanted to get your take off the top about what has unfolded here and the reaction we've seen from MAGA world. I think the most notable part of this is that it's not just MAGA pundits or MAGA influencers who have been talking about Jeffrey Epstein in very vehement and definitive ways for the last 4 years or more. It's the very people who run the law enforcement agencies. The highest positions are occupied by these people like Pam Bondi, Kash Patel, and Dan Bongino. These are the people who have been going around on their podcasts and other podcasts accusing Biden officials of corruptly concealing Jeffrey Epstein's client list. Saying that Bill Gates is in Congress desperately lobbying to conceal the list because he's on it. Insisting constantly that this is like the Rosetta Stone for deciphering the entire corrupt globalist network of degenerates, abusers, and predators. And then they get into office. And within a couple of months, it becomes obvious that for whatever reason, they're not going to release any of the information they have been accusing Biden officials of concealing. And now they're at the point where they're even claiming it doesn't exist. That there is no client list. There's no evidence he ever blackmailed anybody. A complete 180 on everything they've been saying for the last 4 years. So, if we want to assume just for the sake of argument that they're now telling the truth, how do they not come out and very profusely and publicly apologize to all the people who they have been maligning and whose reputations they've been destroying over the last 4 years by accusing them of things that they themselves are now doing? Yeah. That's so well said. And I mean, it was always preposterous to me. The idea that Trump was really going to blow the lid off whatever was going on with Epstein. And to be clear, I think there are a lot of very good questions. Very troubling links and patterns with regard to Jeffrey Epstein. I know something you've been pointing to as the key thing I really want to know about is whether there were links to intelligence agencies. Mossad in particular. But number one, Trump is like the most pro-Israel president. Not that. You know, other American presidents haven't also been pro-Israel. But his first term was extraordinarily pro-Israel. Going even further than previous American presidents had gone. So that's number one. Number two. We know these guys were friends. There are pictures of them together. He was on the quote-unquote Lolita Express. Jeffrey Epstein at least claimed they were best friends for a decade. And so. And number three. You've had a bunch of Trump administration officials who also were involved in various Jeffrey Epstein dealings. I mean, Trump's labor secretary from the first term was Alex Acosta, who was in Florida striking this effectively corrupt sweetheart deal with Jeffrey Epstein that let him get off the hook and avoid significant prison time for some of the crimes that he did commit. So, I always thought. And when you ask Trump, you say, are you going to release these files? He always dithered. He always said, well, maybe. But I'm concerned about this or that. So, you know, it should not have come as a surprise that nothing was going to be different. That he was not in fact going to expose whatever was really going on here. Right? I mean, I do think it's important to note that while Trump and Epstein were obviously very close, they had a falling out. So, he wasn't consorting with Jeffrey Epstein after his conviction to the extent that other people had been. That, to me, is important. The two most interesting things are that even after Jeffrey Epstein got convicted of trafficking minors for commercialized sex, which is basically child rape, it's pedophilia, huge numbers of the most prominent, powerful people in the world had no compunction about openly associating with him. Not just associating with him like passing him by at a party, but going to his house, etc. But then the other thing, Crystal, is that his wealth, Jeffrey Epstein's wealth, is inexplicable in terms of what he did. We know a lot of it came from Les Wexner and other people who are extremely active in pro-Israel activity. So the question that the Trump administration still hasn't answered is, did Jeffrey Epstein work with or for, in any capacity, any intelligence agency, domestic or foreign, the Mossad, the CIA, whomever? And they're just like, we're not going to tell you that. Just move on. Yeah. Just trust us. Nothing to see here. Trust us. We're moving on. All right. Let's go ahead and take a look at this video. I want to play the whole thing of Alex Jones reacting to this news as it was coming out. Now, he has since formulated his own theory of what's actually going on here, which of course conveniently absolves Trump of any sort of responsibility. But let's go ahead and play his initial reaction. Obviously, there's nothing the globalists wouldn't do to keep this from coming out. They've already tried to kill Trump repeatedly. You know. Have they rolled over? I see a lot of signs that. I mean, Trump's pretty much in charge now. And so all evidence points towards them using the information to control the deep state. So meet the new boss. Same as the old boss. The Who song. Won't get fooled again. This is going to be an unmitigated disaster. I don't know how they got Trump and the DOJ to do this. Because the public is not buying it. No one. No one is buying it. I never saw any evidence of Trump involved in any of the stuff that came out. It was all fake. The fake Jane does. All the crap. You know. Jean Carroll. The crazy leftist cat lady. All of it. So now, by coming in and being part of the cover-up, the Trump administration has become part of it. I mean, you just cannot see it any other way. So, I'm going to. I just got to the office. So, I'm going to go throw up. Actually. And this only happens every few years when something really bad happens. I mean, I'm physically going to puke probably right now. My mouth is watering right now. Because I have integrity. And, you know, I just really need the Trump administration to succeed and to save this country. And they're doing so much good. And then for them to do something like this tears my guts out. And you know the left. They're all complicit. They're openly promoting pedophilia. We know they're pure evil. And they'll think it's all funny. Oh. Look. Alex is sad. The MAGA movement is tearing itself apart. Your globalist masters literally want you to eat bugs and live in a 5G 200 square foot coffin apartment. Look at the left. Look at them all posing with their Pfizer shots. Looking like dead zombies. I mean, come on. You guys are sick. And so you shouldn't look at those of us that have a soul still and have integrity in pain over this. And celebrate. You dumb pieces of. So his new theory, which he had on with a guest, is that the Epstein case is being covered up by intelligence groups to protect Western agencies. There also seems to be, from him and a bunch of others by the way, blame shifting onto Pam Bondi. As if she's doing this just freelancing on her own with no input from Trump whatsoever. Completely absolving him of responsibility. But what do you make of Alex's reaction there? Well, it's understandable that it's so heavy and emotional. Because I think a lot of people who maybe don't pay so much attention to MAGA discourse don't have a full appreciation for how central this has been to their entire worldview. This is not like just some isolated little sex scandal that they occasionally would talk about because they thought it implicated their political enemies. This was something they believed was the key to understanding essentially how the entire deep state, how globalist institutions are decaying and rotting from the inside. And we were finally going to get the truth. And again, the fact that it was the very people who are now in charge and doing the cover-up. In their view, who were the ones promising that all of this was going to be exploded out in the open and who were adamant they weren't just saying, maybe there's a client list. They were saying, there is a client list. Why aren't we seeing it? It's impossible for even these leading MAGA influencers to try and justify it. No matter how much they want to defend Trump. The betrayal is just too glaring and blatant. And yes, they're going to try and distract attention from Trump himself and put it on people like Pam Bondi or whatever. But at the end of the day, Pam Bondi is Trump's attorney general. And he has the ability to fire her at any moment. And he won't. Over this. For sure. Some kind of reckoning is going to have to happen. Well, not only that. Let's put C2 up on the screen here. Initially, Pam Bondi, Kash Patel, and Dan Bongino were all taking the bulk of the heat. And then Trump comes in on Truth Social and praises Kash Patel and Dan Bongino, saying that after they closed this case, they're getting back to the basics, locking up criminals, cleaning up America's streets. So, you know, it makes it difficult for people to argue that. Oh, it's Kash Patel and it's Dan Bongino who are the culprits here. I think that's part of why they've shifted so much blame now onto Pam Bondi. Because she has not gotten the overt Trump seal of approval in the wake of this, nothing to see here, on the Jeffrey Epstein case. Right. And you know that's going to come. I mean, Trump doesn't care about the Epstein files. As you said, he would kind off. There was an interview he did with Lex Fridman in October, a month before the election, where he was asked about it and Lex Fridman said, "You're going to release the client list, right? The Epstein client list." And Trump said, "Yeah. You know, we're definitely going to look at that." He was a little noncommittal, but led people to believe that he would. He doesn't care about it. As you said, I think he is very comfortable with having it concealed always. He gave caveats and excuses that the others didn't. So, of course, he's going to defend Pam Bondi. He's never going to fire her. And that's what I mean by a reckoning. At some point, they're going to have to face the fact that everything, not just that they were told and promised, but that they told and promised the people who listened to them, has all come crashing down. Either because it was untrue all along or because the cover-up continues. And it's just too big in the MAGA world to bury it or to ignore it. Yeah. Well, Speaking to that point, J.D. Vance, this was on the campaign trail, was celebrating how the list was going to be released. You had Pam Bondi. We covered this yesterday. Who said just quite recently that she had the client list quote on her desk in an interview with Fox News. And now it's, oh, there is no client list whatsoever. And just as a little walk down memory lane, let's recall J.D. Vance with Theo Vaughn saying we've got to release the list. Here's Alina Habba, recently with Piers Morgan, saying that we are going to be deeply disturbed by the shocking revelations the Trump administration was on the verge of bringing forward. She said, "It is incredibly disturbing. We have flight logs. We have information. Names that will come out. There were so many individuals that were hidden and kept secret and have not been held accountable. I really believe that now with Cash and Pam, there will be accountability. Accountability. And this is one of the things. It's like, I don't expect any of these people." Toyowu said they should apologize. They absolutely should. But I don't expect any of them to reckon with any of it. They'll just pretend they never said it. They'll just say, oh, it's the fake news media trying to sink Trump. You'll have the influencer world saying, oh, well, there's some other higher-level elite pedophile ring that's actually the one that has more power than Donald Trump. They'll spin and they'll cope and they'll lie. And it's just wild to me that this is so common and so typical. Yeah. You know, we covered this on our show last night. And it sounds like you guys had the same fun as we did. When we were going through these clips, I was actually surprised at how adamant and emphatic and definitive a lot of them were. That last one was not Alina Habba as a Trump lawyer or a pundit. That was her as U.S. attorney for New Jersey. And she said we have the names of the people who you're going to be shocked by, who were involved in this. And this is all going to come out. This was not 4 years ago. This was 3 or 4 months ago. So, I believe what you're saying is true. I mean, we have Dan Bongino saying Bill Gates is in Congress every day working hard. Kash Patel said the same thing to make sure that he wasn't exposed as being on the list. He's doing everything he can to suppress it. Implying Bill Gates is a pedophile. That he was with Epstein. That he's on the list. And now they're all like, yeah. Never mind. None of that was true. So, I get what you're saying. They're going to. I mean, like Caroline Leavitt at the White House yesterday. When asked about this, she gave like a 4-second answer. And then she's like, hey, look over here. All these bad guys we're putting in prison. We're rounding them up. They're probably going to be creating theater about immigrants and criminals or whatever to try and distract attention. I just don't think it's going to work with their own base. I'm not sure Americans generally care that much about this. But I think their own base has built their entire worldview on it. It's the edifice of their worldview. And you know, if you spend years promising people things and then it doesn't happen, your own credibility, and therefore your own money-making and your own career, is at stake. And I think a lot of these MAGA people, the big ones, they'll come around. But it's going to take a lot of effort. It's a problem for them. Let's go through some of these various rationales and efforts to cope with this. You've got Insurrection Barbie, a prominent MAGA influencer, who said, I'm not saying we need to move on from Epstein. I want to see accountability for everything. What I am saying is that Epstein is not the end-all and be-all defining moment of the Trump presidency. So, we've already gone from this being quite central for her to now that it doesn't go the right way, it being not ultimately that big a deal. Then from Cernovich, it's out of Trump's hands. There's a chain of command on this planet. Elite pedophiles are at the very top. Even above Trump. Way above him. We've got the Charlie Kirk response, if Trump was on the Epstein list. Why didn't Biden release that info to stop Trump from being president? This is because, of course, it looks suspicious as hell. Especially given Elon Musk threatening to release information from the Epstein list claiming Trump's on it. And then you had Netanyahu coming to town the next day. And then you have this ultra-mega Kathy saying, seriously, who even gives a __ about these files? I'm sure she was not saying that under the Biden administration. And then you have Valentina Gomez saying, covering up for pedophiles is becoming the new normal. I would say this is the most honest attempt to actually grapple with reality. But, you know, Glenn, while I think you're right that Kash Patel and Dan Bongino are going to take a real hit, and I think Pam Bondi is already seeing people say she should resign or be fired. Some of these influencers who went to the whole binder situation and posed for that photo op, being used as propaganda props by the Trump administration previously. I think they'll take on some water and a credibility hit. But what I've seen is that ultimately, with the hardcore, true believer MAGA base, they always find a way to justify whatever happens under the Trump administration. We saw it with the Iran attack. Prior to the U.S. bombing Iran, you had a significant proportion of Republicans, MAGA Republicans in particular, saying we shouldn't do that. The second Trump does it, that number completely shifts. And you've got 85 or 90% who are like, yes, that was the right thing to do. So I think they'll find a way, ultimately, to cope with it. Absolve Trump of responsibility. And blame Pam Bondi or the deep state. Or just get distracted by some other thing that's happening in the world. Yeah. I mean, in reality, this is partisan behavior in general. As you know, I had huge numbers of fans who were Democrats and liberals under George Bush's administration because I was criticizing his war on terror policies. Then Obama comes in, continues many of them, extends many of them, and suddenly they looked at me as their enemy because I was criticizing Obama for doing the same thing. They were like, no. It's different when Obama does it. We trust him. I think it's just partisanship in general. I think MAGA world sometimes actually will push back quite a bit on what Trump's doing if they feel like it's a bridge too far from what they were promised. But what you said is what they're going to do. And it's going to work. I think that's exactly what they're planning and already previewing. Which is, we're going to have some big, cruel, evil, sadistic program to round up a bunch of immigrants and send them to Sudan or wherever. And you're going to get all excited about that. Maybe we'll bomb some other countries because there are some terrorists there. And you'll be excited about that. I think that's clearly what they're planning and banking on the fact that eventually their biggest supporters will just forget about this and move on. And, you know, it's a good, safe bet that that will happen. It is partisan behavior. And I think that's a fair point. But I do think it is stronger with MAGA. You even saw it with the Iran bombing. I wish I had the poll. Because when Trump bombs Iran, You see Republican support for it skyrocket by, I don't know, like 40 points. And you see Democratic support for it go down. But not to quite the same extent. It was maybe a 10-point drop. And there was already low support for such a thing among Democrats. With Trump, he says, I get to define what MAGA is. I get to define what America First is. And I think he's right about that. His supporters have decided. You know, we've got certain ideas of what MAGA is. But ultimately, we trust this guy. And if he says that we need to bomb Iran, well, he must know something that we don't. And we're just going to go along with that. And what I would use as a counterexample here is the fact that under Joe Biden, while you still have the vast majority of Democratic leaders fully on board with giving Israel whatever they want and the bear hug strategy, you had the Democratic base running at lightning speed in the other direction, saying, this is disgusting. This is a genocide. We don't want anything to do with this. So, partisan behavior no doubt impacts people across the board. And I think your example is correct. But I do think there's something unique about the cult of personality around Trump that is particularly strong. And there isn't a similarly situated Democratic figure. At least at this point. That has the same level of pull on the Democratic base. I mean, I think this is a complicated conversation. I would suggest Obama did have that. Especially in his first term. The amount of faith and trust and love and reverence and deference to him among Democrats and liberals in general was extremely strong. I think there was a lot of that around George Bush, too. Especially after September 11th. So, I'm not quite convinced that it's stronger among MAGA. And I actually do think that with Iran. For example, you did have some very prominent Trump allies. Starting with Tucker Carlson but a lot of other people as well. Who from the beginning were saying, you cannot do this. It's a betrayal of America First. They were saying it during the war. They're now saying it still. A lot of people are questioning Trump's relationship with Israel. Asking how that is America First. I think you're right on the level of the average normie Trump supporter being very inclined to trust him and not question him. But I think on the level of more influential pundits, there are at least some of them who do push back pretty assertively. And you even showed some clips of them doing that now with Epstein. Like, wait a minute. What is this? And yes, maybe they're trying. Never on him. Though. It's always Pam Bondi's fault. It's always the deep state's fault. It's always somebody else. And you know, when Steve Bannon, for example, and Tucker, even in that interview with Ted Cruz, which I thought was extraordinary, the way he would position it, and I understand why he does it. Because tactically you can't trample on Trump's ego or else you're going to be dead to him. Or you lose influence. Yeah. Right. The way that he positioned it was that not bombing Iran is the true reflection of what Trump really wants and what he's really asserted. So if he doesn't go in that direction, then he must know something we don't. I actually haven't seen them being particularly critical of the bombing of Iran after the fact. I've seen them moving on to other things. I've seen Steve Bannon, even before Trump decided to bomb Iran, saying, listen, at the end of the day, if he bombs them, we're all going to get back on board. And there's no secret why, because if you do disagree with him and criticize him personally and directly, that's it. You're dead to him. And your influence is going to be toast. You're going to end up like Liz Cheney or any one of the other exiled former Republicans who dared to say negative things about specifically the person of Donald Trump. Yeah. I mean, again, I do think that a lot of presidents look at the world that way. If you openly or publicly criticize them, they start to get really angry. But, you know, we chatted briefly before we began about the Netanyahu visit. And I was saying that nobody is more easily manipulated than Trump. And so, if you're somebody who actually cares about not just opining but having influence, you want to formulate what you're saying in a way that's likely to appeal to Trump. So, a lot of these neocons were saying, America first means being strong and showing the world that we will take action. That's America first. Playing on his ego that way. And other people are saying, America first means we don't go to wars for Israel or for other countries. Always trying to get Trump to believe. You laid out this brilliant philosophy. And the way that you align with it is by doing what I want. I think that's just being strategic. I think that's being mindful of trying to exert influence rather than just being on the outside throwing rocks like Elon Musk now has to do. So I get your point. Obviously, there's a ton of people who are hacks. Who are willing to go to bat for Trump no matter what. And who will do so here as well. I'm just a little bit doubtful that it's worse than with other previous presidents. Especially ones with very strong personal charisma like Obama had. Who I think did inspire similar things. But at the end of the day, whether it's more or less or whatever, I agree with you that directionally, that is what's going to happen. And so, we're left in this familiar, dizzying landscape of modern politics, where promises evaporate and loyalties are tested. Yet, beneath the noise and the spin, the core questions remain. The pursuit of truth, the demand for accountability, and the hope for genuine integrity in public life. These are not partisan ideals. They are the bedrock of a healthy society. While the powerful may bank on our collective amnesia, the conversations we have, the questions we continue to ask, are the sparks that keep the light of truth from being extinguished entirely. If you believe in the importance of these conversations and want to continue exploring the stories that shape our world, free from the constraints of the mainstream narrative, then we invite you to become a part of our community. Please hit that subscribe button, like this video, and leave a comment below with your thoughts. Your support is what allows us to keep asking the tough questions and bringing you independent analysis. Thank you for watching.